Hello and welcome to Haunted Montreal's Spooky Story Sessions. I'm your host, Holly Rhiannon, and today I'm going to tell you all about St. Louis Square. Tucked into the heart of Montreal's Plateau neighborhood, St. Louis Square looks like something off of a postcard. Laid out in 1876, it's a peaceful, leafy park framed by grand Victorian homes. At its center, a cast-iron fountain bubbles beside stone busts of famous poets. There's even a charming little stone building that now houses a cafe and ice cream shop. It's a place where locals linger with coffee and tourists stop to take photos. But behind all that beauty, St. Louis Square hides a far more unsettling past. Over the years, it has been a gathering place for restless artists, the heart of Montreal's hippie movement, and later a neighborhood in decline marked by drugs and prostitution. Strange things have happened here, violent things, and if the stories are true, some of that past still clings to the square. People say it's haunted, and once you learn what has unfolded, it's easy to understand why. Some say the ghosts of St. Louis Square aren't just real, they're angry. Artists have spoken of being haunted by more than just creative doubt. They tell stories of strange animals that vanish into the night, shadowy figures lurking just out of reach, even demonic presences. Whether it's all imagination or something more, the square has a way of getting under your skin. The most well-known spirit is a man, tormented, confused, and visibly distressed. People say he appears late at night, pacing the park aimlessly, wringing his hands or clutching his face in silent anguish. If anyone gets too close, he disappears right in front of them. One local shared their experience with Haunted Montreal, saying, "Sometimes I sit on my balcony at night and wait for him to appear. When he does, which is often, he scares the crap out of those wandering the park after dark." No one knows who he is or why he walks the square, but he's been seen countless times, always with the same pained expression, always vanishing before anyone can get a word out. To understand why this place might hold on to its ghosts, it helps to know its history. Before there was a park, the site held Montreal's first major water reservoir. Built in 1849, the Réservoir de la Côte à Baron, or Reservoir Jean-Baptiste, could hold up to 3 million gallons of water. It was 20 feet deep, flanked on both sides by parkland. But in 1852, a massive fire tore through Montreal, known as the Great Fire. It destroyed half the city and left around 10,000 people homeless. The reservoir was drained and shut down for repairs, but the damage was done. A newer, much larger reservoir was soon built above McGill University called the McTavish Reservoir, completed in 1856. With a capacity of 37 million gallons, it was named after Simon McTavish, ironically one of Montreal's most infamous ghosts. By 1876, the old reservoir was deemed obsolete. In its place, the city created St. Louis Square, named for industrialist brothers Emmanuel and Jean-Baptiste St. Louis. The park quickly became a favorite among the French-speaking bourgeoisie. And in 1880, the old reservoir basin was repurposed, used as a swimming pool in the summer, and transformed into a skating rink in the winter. Starting in 1885, elegant Victorian homes began to rise around the square, built in styles like Second Empire, Neo-Queen Anne, and Chateau de Glace. The area soon attracted Montreal's French-Canadian elite. A few years later, on June 24, 1906, a bust of beloved Quebec poet Octave Crémazie was unveiled as well. Sculpted by Louis-Philippe Hébert, the statue honored Crémazie's role in shaping French-Canadian literature and identity. They called him the father of French-Canadian poetry. Then, in 1931, the square gained one of its most iconic features, a magnificent cast-iron fountain. Originally installed in Vigier Square back in 1850, it was relocated to St. Louis Square when Berry Street was extended. Today, all of it, the statues, the fountain, the elegant homes, stand in quiet contrast to the stories whispered about the area after dark. But it's that mix of beauty and unease that gives St. Louis Square its haunting charm. In the 1940s and 1950s, St. Louis Square began to change. Many of its wealthier residents packed up and moved to Outremont, a rapidly growing, upscale neighborhood with sprawling homes, lush gardens, and grand parks that made the square seem modest in comparison. By the 1960s, the decline was hard to ignore. Even though a new feature had been added, a small stone Vespasienne or public toilet relocated from Viger Square again during the construction of the metro and converted into a cafe, the neighborhood's grandeur was fading. The once stately Victorian homes surrounding the park had started to deteriorate. Most were split into low-rent rooming houses. But with that decline came a new kind of energy. The area drew in poets, sculptors, painters, musicians, authors, an entire world of French-speaking artists and bohemians. For them, St. Louis Square became something more than a park. It was an open-air studio, a gathering place, a creative sanctuary. Artists painted on easels under the trees, writers worked from benches, poets recited verses aloud, while photographers captured the unique mix of beauty and decay. The square even found its way into pop culture. Paulo Noel's musical hit Carré Saint-Louis helped embed the park into Quebec's public imagination. In his 1971 book, Carré Saint-Louis, local author Jean-Jules Richard described the transformation. This old, wealthy neighborhood was now invaded by the poor artists, old-school bohemians, and more recently, beatniks and hippies. By the early 1970s, the square had picked up a new nickname, Village Carré Saint-Louis. It was the heart of Montreal's hippie movement, especially in the warmer months. People flocked there to play guitar, smoke weed, and hang out. The vibe was laid back and a little bit lawless. The running joke at the time? There was always a cloud of marijuana hovering over Village Carré Saint-Louis, and it never quite cleared. But not everyone was happy with the changes happening around St. Louis Square. Some longtime residents saw the Bohemian takeover as the collapse of what had once been a respectable bourgeois neighborhood. Their concerns weren't just about noise or marijuana, they worried about cultural vandalism. One major point of concern? The bust of Octave Crémazie. Crémazie, considered a sacred figure by many Quebec nationalists, had stood watch over the square since 1906. But by 1972, tensions were running high. Fearing the monument might be damaged by the growing counterculture movement, an executive committee made a controversial decision. The bust would be removed. It was relocated to a derelict patch of grass known as Place Crémazie at the corner of Crémazie and Saint Laurent Boulevards, tucked away beside Highway 40, far from what some officials viewed as the hippie invasion of St. Louis Square. But removing the statue didn't halt the square's descent. By the early 1980s, the area had taken a troubling turn. It wasn't just a haven for artists anymore, it had become a hub for drug dealers, pimps, and underage prostitution. The layout of the surrounding streets didn't help. The road system allowed cars to circle the square endlessly, making it really easy for clients to find exactly what they were looking for without even needing to park. Eventually, the city stepped in. They changed the flow of traffic to prevent this constant loop, and slowly the dealers and pimps began to move elsewhere, looking for places that were easier to navigate by car. Then came gentrification. By the late 1980s, the old rooming houses began to disappear. Developers and new homeowners moved in, restoring the grand Victorian homes to their former glory. As the neighborhood became more polished, the city decided it was time for a cultural return as well. In 2002, officials ruled that the bust of Octave Crémazie could finally return to St. Louis Square. Just 3 years later, in 2005, a second literary monument was added, this time to Émile Nelligan, Quebec's most celebrated poet. His statue was placed in the park's southwest corner, not far from the house where he once lived on Laval Street. It was unveiled on June 7, 2005, marking another chapter in the square's strange and storied life. In December 2005, just months after the unveiling of the Nelligan bust, the Project for Public Spaces described St. Louis Square as the closest thing to a European neighborhood square you'll find this side of the Atlantic. And today, it carries another nickname, the Poetic Soul of Montreal. And that title isn't just poetic license. Over the years, an astonishing number of Quebec's most celebrated artists have lived, worked, or found inspiration in and around the square. The list reads like a who's who of cultural heavyweights. Michel Tremblay, Gilles Carle, Claude Jutra, Jean-Jules Richard, Jean Roche-Boivin, Gaston Miron, André Gagnon, Gérald Godin, Pauline Julien, Mary Travers Bolduc, Danny Leferrier, Louis Royer, Robert Prenoval, and, of course, Émile Nelligan. Now, many of these artists shared more than just a postal code. Their work is laced with something darker. Ghosts, demons, cherubs, haunting images appear again and again in their art, creatures that feel born of fever dreams or something far older. The suggestion is clear. Whatever lingers in St. Louis Square, whatever disturbed energy lives just beneath its cobblestones, has seeped into the creative minds who pass through it. Some of these lives and the themes that ran through them are explored in the French-language documentary Carré Saint-Louis, Une Histoire Populaire. It looks into the square's artistic legacy and the strange, often tragic stories of the people who helped define it. Of all the tormented artists who lived near St. Louis Square, two names rise above the rest: poet Émile Nelligan and filmmaker Claude Jutra. Some even believe that the ghost still seen pacing the square might be the restless spirit of one of them. Émile Nelligan was born in 1879, the son of an Irish father and a French-Canadian mother. In the late 1800s, his family lived in two homes on Laval Street, first at 3686 from 1886 to 1892, and later at 3958. Both addresses are just steps from the square. Nelligan was a prodigy. He was first published at just 16, and in the span of 4 years, he wrote nearly 170 works: poems, sonnets, rondelles, and songs. But his writing wasn't grounded in the land or traditions of Quebec like the poets before him. Instead, his inspiration came from deep within. His work overflowed with sadness, nostalgia, and inner sorrow. It was vivid, symbolic, and drenched with emotional intensity, almost painfully so. But that brilliance, as it often does, came at a cost. On August 9, 1899, Nelligan suffered a psychotic break. His friend, Louis Dantin, later described what it was like in those final months before the collapse.
Nelligan would lock himself away for whole days, alone with his delirious thoughts, and in the absence of external excitement, endeavoring to torture the most acute fibers within himself, or else to sing to the surrounding beings, to the walls, to the furniture, to the trinkets that surrounded him, the always sad song of his memories. At night he had visions, either radiant or horrible, young girls who were at the same time seraphim, muses, and lovers, or else enraged specters, ghost cats, sinister demons who breathed despair into him. Each of the dreams took shape the next day in verses penciled with feverish hand, and were already among the sparkling features madness showed its hideous claws.
As the visions grew worse, something snapped. Nelligan climbed a tree in St. Louis Square and refused to come down. His father had him committed to the Catholic Saint Benoit retreat. In 1925, he was moved to the Saint-Jean-de-Dieu asylum, where he would remain for the rest of his life. Rumors circulated that he had been given a lobotomy. Whatever the case, he remained institutionalized until his death on November 18, 1941, and sadly, following his mental health crisis, he never wrote another word of poetry. Claude Jutra, another artist marked by torment, was born on March 11, 1930. A director, writer, actor, editor, and cinematographer, he played a central role in the development of cinema in Quebec. His films, Tu Prends in 1963 and Mon Oncle Antoine in 1970, were both highly significant during the Quiet Revolution. The latter in particular is still regarded as one of the greatest Canadian films ever made. Jutra was celebrated for his contributions to Quebec's francophone culture, winning several prestigious awards. He was also recognized in queer circles for being openly gay, a rare and courageous stance at the time. But on November 5th, 1986, Jutra mysteriously vanished from his home. Having lived with Alzheimer's disease for several years, many speculated he had simply wandered off. Despite extensive searches, no trace of him was found. Then, on April 19, 1987, a body was discovered on the banks of the St. Lawrence River at Cap Santé near Quebec City. The bloated corpse had a note in its pocket reading, "Je m'appelle Claude Jutra." An autopsy confirmed the cause of death as drowning. Jutra had jumped off the infamous Jacques Cartier suicide bridge, and his body had been trapped in the ice of the river for months.
Residents of this small Quebec village discovered the body on Sunday. It had been in the St. Lawrence River several months. Police have not yet made an official identification, but say they are virtually certain they have solved the mystery of Claude Jutra's disappearance. It's a relief to finally know what happened, says villager Adrienne Trepanier. But it's still painful because everybody loved Claude Jutra. Everybody loved his movies. And this was his most famous film, Mon Oncle Antoine, the film that won Jutra acclaim as Canada's greatest movie maker ever.
Following his death, Jutra's former home at 3492 Laval Street became the headquarters for the Quebec Union of Writers, an organization dedicated to promoting Quebec literature and defending the rights of literary professionals. The location was a fitting one, considering the square's long history of artistic significance. In 2016, however, Quebec was rocked by allegations that Jutra had been a pedophile. According to film historian Yves Leve's biography, Jutra had been involved with boys as young as 14 and even younger in some cases. These included children of his friends and underage male prostitutes who frequented St. Louis Square at night. When the allegations were confirmed, the backlash was swift. By 2018, Jutra was removed from street names, a Montreal cinema, a park on Prince Arthur Street, and even Quebec's most prestigious film award, the Prix Jutra, was renamed. Both Nelligan and Jutra are emblematic of the tormented artists who once populated the area around St. Louis Square, which is why many believe one of them could be the ghost that haunts the park. But they aren't the only ones who may still roam its grounds. Take sculptor Robert Prénouveau, for example. Originally from St. Boniface, Manitoba, Prénouveau lived in a room near the square where he began installing human figure sculptures in an abandoned field to the south of St. Louis Square. Today, this area, now known as Place Gilles Carle, is lined with condos and has become a heat island far removed from its former state. When Prénouveau lived there, the field was overrun with weeds and frequented by junkies and other unwanted individuals. In an effort to push back against the blight, he created grotesque humanoid sculptures, hoping they would ward off the unwanted visitors. His plan seemed to work, though not without causing some confusion. On at least 3 occasions, the police were called after concerned citizens mistook the sculptures for dead bodies lying in the field. And as if the square didn't already have its share of tragic stories, in 1975, Jean-Jules Richard, author of Carré Saint-Louis, passed away in obscurity right in the square itself. And now we pause our story for a brief interlude, my investigation at St. Louis Square. We're here at St. Louis Square, and I've got some equipment, and we're gonna do a little mini ghost hunt tonight, this evening. We are here at sunset, which is when we might see this mysterious man wringing his hands, holding his hands to his face, and we're not sure who he is. He could be Emile Nelligan, who you see right here, or he could be Claude Jutra, or any number of tortured poets who have made their way through these paths. So one of the first things that we need to do here is turn off our Wi-Fi and go into airplane mode, because that actually affects your EMF and a lot of your tools that you want to use here. I don't have a huge kit at the moment. I have a spirit box, I have an EMF, your basic, and I am also using the Spirit Talker app, which is going to show some words that are going to come up here that may or may not be from the Restless Dead. So I don't think there was a particular spot where people were sighting this man. He just sort of walks through the park. So we're gonna just go on a little walk and sort of take a look around. We've already got some B-roll footage. I'm going to watch these, and if they do anything, then I will talk to them and see what comes of it. We have a word. Dark.
Dark.
Now, skeptics of this particular app, will say that there's a lot of words programmed in here. They're just sort of random things that you might think when you were hunting for ghosts, which as a skeptic myself, I will always, keep that in mind. But a kind of interesting thing is a lot of the time this starts with the name of someone, and it's not doing that this time. Now we have I'm in my 40s. So this is what this app does. It'll give you a few different things. It'll come up with this word bank. Now, I'm trying to remember the age that our poets were when they both passed, because one was in the 40s and one was in the 80s.
Nelligan was about 62 or 63 when he died.
Okay, did we have one in the 40s?
I'm not sure about Jutra.
I'm going to have to double check that one, so we might have someone in their 40s.
I think
we'll
he
see.
Was older, but yeah,
Okay.
I'll have to check it.
Thank you to my camera woman, Pamela. By the way, you're going to hear her voice a little bit throughout, but you will not be seeing her. She's a ghost herself. And so we don't have anything on the EMF meter, but we do have this dark, and I'm in my 40s, so we're gonna take a walk. I would love to know your name. If there is someone trying to reach out, I would love to know your name. If you would like to share that with me, I'm gonna be walking around the park for a little bit. My name is Holly. You can feel free to divulge whenever you like, or not, it's up to you. Another thing to note, sometimes when you're doing this outside, you can have EMF spikes at light poles and stuff like that, and also places where you will see Wi-Fi. So you have to be careful if you're walking around and doing this and you suddenly see it go red or something. If you're near something that could have Wi-Fi or some sort of magnetic reading, like, be aware, because that might be it. Team. We are a team. A team of two tonight.
Hey, you. What's your name?
Yeah, we still want to know your name. Vernon.
Vernon. Oh.
Vernon.
Okay.
All right. Hello, Vernon. I don't think we know your name. What era are you from, Vernon? Now, as I've told you in the story of this square, there were many artists and playwrights and poets who passed through this area. So we could have a variety of people who are still walking these paths. We've had another word come up, which was invoke. We are trying to invoke you, Vernon. Not to follow us out of this park, by the way. You got to stay here. As inspiring as you might be, we don't know who you are. Maybe you have a lot of amazing work, and we could be very inspired as authors and artists ourselves. But we don't really want you following us out, so we're invoking you to tell us about yourself now and here. Still nothing on the EMF, which is kind of interesting. Now, I do have another app and also another device, which is the Spirit Box, which you've probably seen on a lot of different ghost hunting shows. And that one's kind of interesting because it works with radio waves and picks up what people might be saying. I just kind of like this one a little bit better because you get the words and you also get to save them after. So you can, like, if you're trying to remember what happened, you can save it in a text document and go through it. I think we're gonna take a little walk here and sit here for a minute just to see if we see anything, because people had reported seeing this ghostly man from their apartments, like from their balconies and stuff, right? So you're thinking all of these buildings all around here, it could be sort of anyone watching from the perimeter, and I think we're gonna see, like, around the perimeter of the park if anything does crop up. So we've got the necrophonic on. Hello. Hello, we believe that there's a spirit here who walks at night. A spirit, a man. Is the man who walks here at night... They talk when I'm talking. Hello. So if you notice, we've got this man's voice a couple times saying hello. Hello. Could the man speak again and tell me his name? If it's a no from the lady, I would like to hear from the man, please. We're gonna leave this on, and I'm just gonna do a little pan here. So we're... hear a lot of voices going on the necrophonic. I'm not seeing any walkers of the spiritual kind so far. We're sitting here and just sort of looking at the perimeter. And we might not see anything. We might not get anything out of this. That's how it goes with paranormal research. But it's a beautiful location, and one of my favorites even before I knew the history and all the paranormal elements of it. Oh. That was interesting. Hello. Whoever just spoke and lit up our EMF. Could you turn... Thank you. Hello. Salut. Hello. Would you be able to tell us your name? Are you hearing a name from this at all?
I thought I heard my name, but I don't think that.
I don't know.
I thought I heard Pam.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you notice this EMF, now tell me if I'm wrong, I am rather new to ghost hunting still. I don't believe this should be reacting to sound. And again, the Wi-Fi is off of this. Emile. Emile.
Oh my god.
Is Emile here tonight? Yeah. Emile, would you speak to us? We're artists as well, and we admire your work. Very seriously. We were hoping to see you tonight, but I'm not seeing anything so far. No. Are you not walking tonight? Emile, is it you who walks through the park at night? I'd like to hear from Emile, please. Yes, Emile. Emile, would you be able to turn our EMF meter here, this little device, to orange or red? No, it's quite easy. You should be able to just change the lights right here. It's green right now. Change it to orange or red. You were doing it before. I know, you don't need to perform on command. Emile, are you still with us? Is there anything that you would like to say? I'll tell you that we do have people who are watching this video. I would like to give you full attention without screaming in the background. Yeah, we. If you notice, we do have this one strong male voice that keeps coming through that's saying Emile and we. And there may be a language issue. That could be a problem. So I apologize. I'm not very good with French. But if there is something you would like to tell us in English, we would love to share it with the people who watch this. Thank you for moving the EMF. You did very well. Maybe we'll come back with our French host to speak with you better, and that will help. But I appreciate the communication through Necrophonic and through our EMF as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you. We walked through the square, we sat for a bit and tried to keep an eye out for our mysterious ghost man. Maybe he comes when it's a little bit darker, I'm not sure, but this was at sunset where, the sun is almost fully set at this point, but I think we had some interesting chatter on the spirit box, and I would like to come back for sure some other time and do a bit of a longer investigation with someone who can speak French, maybe with Dr. Mab, I would imagine, and just see if Emile will talk to us again. But you tell me what you heard. I think we got a very clear Emile twice on that, which is pretty interesting. Since the gentrification of the square, artists continue to find inspiration in the park, its creative legacy, and its spectral presence. For instance, arts professors regularly bring their students to the square for drawing and photography lessons. The Montreal Infringement Festival also frequently hosts artistic parades and held its famous Poetry in the Park series there in 2015. Kerouac and Coda Cluedo even wrote a rap song, Carré Saint Louis, which reflects on the ghosts haunting them at night. St. Louis Square also has been a favorite setting for the Just for Laughs Gags team playing pranks on unsuspecting passersby. Tragically, death continues to be part of the square's story. In March 2023, literary critic Jean Roche Boivin, who had lived in his studio apartment on St. Louis Square for 30 years, died from a heart attack. He had recently been run-evicted from his home, a loss that some believe contributed to his sudden death. On November 11th of the same year, a ceremony was held at the bust of Nelligan to honor the memory of several artists from the Infringement Festival. Among those remembered were Rebecca Ann Banks, Oscar Elliott, Roman Fee, David Finario, Marie-Hélène Henry, E. Lloyd McCarty, Ange-Aimée Woods, Louis Royer, and Tim Sentman. During the ceremony, the ashes of poet Rebecca Ann Banks were scattered in the garden behind the bust, a place where she loved to recite her poetry. St. Louis Square still holds a central place in Quebec's artistic memory, a space where creativity and history meet under the shadow of something stranger. If you visit after dark, just know you might not be alone. That's it for today, but before we wrap up, we would like to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video and the added investigation, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest content. Share your thoughts on this episode, and feel free to include any of your own ghost stories in the comments down below. While you wait for our return, be sure to check out the original blogs by Donovan King over at hauntedmontreal.yt, where you can also get tickets for in-person haunted storytelling experiences. And don't forget, we'll be back with a new video in 2 weeks. But until then, stay spooky.